Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. Glad to be back. Took last week off for Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone had a great holiday. All of us Americans that celebrate American Thanksgiving. And I hope you ate responsibly and didn't end up in a tryptophan coma. But yeah, we had a great time. We actually spent a decent amount of time after Thanksgiving Day. We went up to camp. Spent a couple days up there working on some things, enjoying that fall weather that's still sticking around for a little bit. Well, before we get into our podcast interview, I wanted to just do a couple updates, one of which is for our Patreon supporters. I know we communicate via Patreon, but also wanted to make announcements because I think some people hear this faster than they look at the Patreon feed. But we are going to be having our first live chat session, and that is actually for all tier groups, and that's going to be on the 13th of December. So at the point of recording this bumper, it'll just be a couple weeks away, and we're going to do that in the evening time. I believe we've got it scheduled for 8 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll just have an open discussion there for about an hour, talking about all things pastured pig. People can throw some questions back and forth and just see. So we're hoping to have participants there. So if you're a Patreon supporter, by all means, join us there. If not, now would be the time, of course. Just as little as $5 a month, you can jump in there and be a part of the group. Well, we've had a good couple weeks so far since our last podcast, as far as things go with the pigs. Getting ready for farrowing in January. That's the plan. I do believe two of my sows are still settled. They've been showing signs, although the boars have been messing around with them a little bit, but I think they're still settled. So we're looking forward to that, and I'm going to try something a little different with our farrowing setup. We'll be utilizing our farrowing barn last time, but we'll incorporate our greenhouse hoop house as one of our farrowing options as well, because they should farrow within just several days of each other. All right, well, the conversation we're having is with John Johnson, and John's from Ohio. He's Poplar Ridge Family Farm over in Ohio, which is not too far from us, and it was a good conversation I had with John, but hang on as you listen to this podcast. Hang on to the end. Make sure you come to the end, because we actually talk about his first year raising hogs and sharing the hanging weights, because he had 3 different breeds he was dealing with there, and just seeing how those breeds came out hanging weight wise, because they were all part of the same group. They all ran the same pasture, all had the same feed, and just see how they finished out. So when we recorded this, he was getting ready to take the pigs to the processor. Now that I'm doing the bumpers, he's included that information for me. So at the end of the podcast, when I do the back end bumper there, then I'll include that data. So I'll catch you guys on the back end. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. Today, we are going northwest of Red Tool House, just across the mighty Ohio River, and we're going to talk with Poplar Ridge Family Farm and the owner of that farm, John Johnson. Welcome, John.
Hey, Troy. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing very good. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. How are things across the river? You've had some pretty good cold snaps already, haven't you?
Yeah, we've seen some frost already early this fall, and actually this coming week, early November, is looking like it's going to be warmer than some of our days in October. So I guess that's fall in Ohio, at least in our area anyway. Yep,
we run into the same thing. I remember riding my motorcycle on Christmas Day because it was so warm one time, and after we'd already had some freezing temperatures in November, you never know what you're going to get here in the Mid-Atlantic, do you?
That's very true.
All right, so let's. I want to tell our audience. I actually got to meet John face to face through the Homesteaders of America conference. We were there just this 1st of October, and ran into John and got to talk to him for a bit. So as Providence would have it, our meeting obviously led to this discussion now that we're having here on the podcast. So, John, first of all, tell me a little bit about Poplar Ridge Family Farm, maybe a little bit of the history and the genesis of why you are now there raising animals and specifically pastured pork.
Sure. We are located in southeastern Ohio. We're about an hour southeast of Columbus, and probably the nearest city most folks would recognize would be Athens, Ohio, where Ohio University is, just another 30 minutes southeast of me. Probably the biggest draw to my area is the Hocking Hills region, which is a high tourism area. And we are located on 75 acres here in Hocking County. The majority of that, I'd say 50 to 55 acres is wooded. We have another 15 to 20 that's made up of several different pastures and meadows. But we moved here in 2016. Mainly, we just wanted to get out of town. I didn't move to this property with the idea of farming initially. We moved, just wanted our kids to have a safe place to be able to go outside and be able to run around without having to keep a very close eye on them, sit outside with them while they're outside. And I like to hunt and fish and be outside. So, and we like to hike and camp as a family. So it just made sense for us to look for some acreage and something a little more quiet, which was at the top of my list. And we really found that with where we are. Our house sits about a quarter mile off the road, and we enjoy the privacy and the quietness of where we are. But moving from 2016, we spent a lot of time sort of fixing up the house and getting things how we wanted it to be. But 2020 sort of rolled around, and being at home together and wanting to sort of kind of get into the homesteading thing was initially what was kind of pushing me. I've always really been interested in the homesteading thing, which is part of why we bought the property, but farming didn't really come together yet for me before that. So we started out with chickens. In 2020, we went and bought 6 chickens just to raise eggs for our own family. And you probably have heard people talk about chicken math and how that goes. We didn't stick with 6 chickens very long. So once we had 6 chickens, it's like, if you can raise 6, you can raise 20 or 30. And so other people were wanting eggs from us and things like that. So that's kind of where we started to dip our toe in the water, was with chickens.
Yeah, very good. So along that same vein then, what was the thought process to say, okay, chickens are doing what they're doing, now it's time for pigs? So why did you go with pigs at that point?
I think, for me personally, I raised a few hogs for FFA and the fair back when I was a young kid. So I was familiar with pigs initially. The second thing is I'm a big fan of Joel Salatin, and seeing his operation and seeing different YouTube videos and reading books and things from him, and seeing how he used the hogs on pasture and through the woods made a lot of sense to me. I also think it's a real nice next step from chickens. If you're looking to get into, starting to get into some larger farm animals, pigs are a great next step. I think one is they're relatively short term. You're talking about 6 to 8 months for a pig compared to a year or 2 years for cattle. And also, I know already that I love pork. That just makes so much sense to me. Is if I can't sell something, at least I can eat it. My family's not so sure about eating sheep or something along that lines. Whereas I would love to have some sheep, but that's not a meat we eat regularly. But I'm very confident that I can either personally consume the pork or that it would be very easy to sell. So that was kind of my genesis of why I chose pork, and it really just made sense for my property too. I mentioned already we have 55 of that 75 acres is wooded, and so I'm not going to be running a whole lot of cows out here right now or something like that, just because I don't have the pasture for it at the moment. But pigs, they really fit ideally in the wood lines and cleaning up the brush and things that I have around here that that need that attention anyway, that I would have to be doing either mechanically or using my own physical labor to clear such things. And so it just really made sense for me, my property, and my history with the animal as well.
Yeah, that's great. And man, I love what you said there. And in very similar situation, and I don't want to go down this rabbit trail too much, but I appreciate what you said, John. That looking at your property, and if you look at this from a permaculture standpoint, people say if you're going to buy land, you're going to get on land, spend a year on it first before you make any big decisions, any big changes to kind of let the land speak to you, kind of see how it handles the seasons, how it handles dry, how it handles wet, all those type of things. But looking at that and saying, yeah, okay, chickens are easy. They're low cost barrier entry because you can buy a chicken for a couple bucks, and if you kill it, then you're only out a couple bucks plus feed. And then you just keep looking at these larger animals, and when you get to pigs, you see that, at least in my experience, and I'm sure you're probably the same, being that our topography is very similar, that a strand of electric wire through the woods is cheaper fence than anything you'd keep goats in, keep sheep in, even cattle to that point. So the startup infrastructure is fairly cheap. And the turn time on it, you're not looking at 2 years for your money to show up or your return on investment to show up. Like you said, that's 6 to 8 months. And then, of course, just what the land has. If the land's telling you, hey, we got tons of woods, we don't have a lot of grazing grass for a ruminant, but man, if you put a couple pigs in here, you can actually do some function stacking where the pigs are growing off the mast and off the brambles and things they're eating, but it's keeping you from having to do all that work. So I appreciate looking at that you're looking at that, seeing how some others like Joel Salatin and those have done that and say, okay, this just makes the most sense because that's where our land is geared. It's kind of what the land is telling us after we've reviewed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Just being here on this property for the time we were, and it wasn't necessarily purposeful that I was waiting, but it ended up being a very good thing that I did wait, because now I know where those spots are where even pigs maybe shouldn't be. There's some old trash piles and things on this property that were here from before us. And with that strand of electric wire, I'm able to take them right up to those things and around those things and sort of expose the land around it so that I can get to those things now and clean up some of the stuff that I would have had to blaze a trail to get to.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I mean, that's what I can't stress that enough. And I know a lot of people listening already have pigs, so they know what we're talking about. But if I was to be someone standing on a soapbox and saying why you need to have pigs, and just point that out, that man, you can take. I know our farm years ago had really bad issues with multiflora rose, and I know you guys have that up in Ohio as well. But just nasty stuff, and it grows in such a way where it kind of falls over itself that it's tough to get in there. If you can't get your tractor in there and remove it by those mechanical means, it's tough to get in there by hand and reach the stalks to cut them, because you got to crawl through this huge tumbleweed of briars. But what I would do with the pigs is I just go through about this time of year when everything's are going dormant. I go through there and take a handful of field corn and just toss it in the dead center of those multiflora rose bushes and come back in about a week, and they are just obliterated because their pig hide is so thick. They just jump in there and they're rooting out that corn, and they'll turn over those multiflora rose roots in the same process. So it's really neat how they can be excavators to help us with our plans on our farm.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned multiflora rose, because that was a big factor in why I chose pigs. We do have a major problem with that here where we are as well. I don't know exactly how many acres of pasture I've lost on my wood lines, but I would venture to guess, my wood lines have lost probably in some spots 50 to 75 feet of that, just from brush in general, but especially from multiflora rose overtaking that wood line. That's just where that stuff loves to grow.
Yeah.
And my choices sort of are what you said. You get in there and clear it by hand or by tractor, which some spots are too steep for me to do.
Yep, same thing here.
Or you get goats, and I did not have the fencing for goats, so pigs were the ideal choice for that. Just watching other people do the same thing, like you mentioned, and it's worked out great.
Yeah, yeah. So and again, not to go down a rabbit trail here, but I want to ask you because again, we're so close that geographically that there's a lot of similarities. So, was your property that the cleared land that you had when you got the property was that in crop or was that cut for hay?
Most of the cleared pasture here had been hayed.
Yeah,
They took hay off of it for years, I think, and you can tell that from the broom's edge that's out
right,
here
right.
that the pastures were suffering. They did have horses on it for a time period before us. I'm not sure how long those horses were there, or if there would have been any kind of. I would doubt there would have been any kind of rotating of the horses. It's probably just more like free access to a
Hmm.
certain portion of the pasture.
Right, exactly. Yeah, free choice all the way around. So you don't get any pasture buildup. You just
Mm,
get the bad stuff growing.
yep,
And
exactly.
that's interesting because what you're talking about, where I see that so much, especially in this farmland that's kind of being turned over. So it's kind of, yeah, in our area, if you leave pasture unattended, it becomes Appalachian hardwood forest again. And I know that's the same up in Ohio. If you leave it alone, it's going to be a stand of trees at some point. And what we see with a lot of this land, especially where it's cut for hay, and usually the situation is the guy cutting the hay is not the landowner. The landowner is just letting the person cut just for the sake, hey, keep my pastures clear. You can cut it and have the hay for free, or maybe there's a small amount of money, changing hands there. But the guy that's cutting the hay doesn't necessarily have the investment in it that he'd want to keep the meadows pristine. So these edges, like you talked about, the multiflora rose just creeps in and creeps in. So as the guy comes and cuts, in Ohio, you guys probably can get a third cutting, usually in Ohio, I believe. But so as they come and cut those pastures only 3 times a year, to save on their equipment, of course, they just step in. They don't want to get on the edge of the pasture and cut into multiflora rose or grapevine or autumn olive or any of that stuff that's popping up there. So they just kind of keep coming in and they cut lesser and less and less. So that pasture actually shrinks. So finding land like that may look like, oh wow, there's a lot of work that has to be done, and that's where the pig comes in, because the pig is just going to thrive on that forest edge. So you step in 20, 30, 40 feet from the edge of the wood line into that pasture and let those pigs have those fringes, and you've got a touchdown. And I've noticed, John, on your social media, that I've noticed you have a lot of areas there, at least the pictures of that. You've got a lot of areas there where you have your gravity feeder there on the edge of the wood line, so it's easy for you to come fill it up, access the pigs, kind of keep an eye on them. But then behind them is the woods that they can go hang out in. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely the situation they're in right now. I actually took them initially when they were younger. I took them more through a denser wood lot. We had a particular section of our woods that had a path that ran right down the middle of it, and so I would just pull that gravity feeder right down the path.
Hmm.
So the reason for that was purposeful, is because earlier on in the season, when it's so hot, I wanted them to have pretty much constant access to shade, and to keep them cool, because I'm not pulling a shade or a shelter around with me currently, in my setup.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was purposeful. Now that it's later in the season and getting to be fall, I've kind of worked my way up to this spot where I'm at now on purpose to try to hit that multiflora rose and give them some access to grass and pasture on the edge as well.
Very good, very good. So let's transition here a little bit and talk about. Let's talk about this. So right now are you dealing with feeders? So this year's herd that you have, were these feeders that you acquired? Did you farrow these? How did you come about these pigs?
Yep, these were feeders that we acquired, which oddly enough was quite difficult to do, even for just 11 pigs around here. Trying to find either people that had 11 or could get them to me at the time frame I needed them, because, as you know, Troy, trying to get butcher dates is very difficult. So I actually had the butcher dates set before I got the pigs. So I was trying to back into finding pigs that would be grown out at the right time frame to meet that butcher date, because I definitely didn't want to let those go. And so it was pretty difficult to find the pigs I was looking for. But in the end, I did find a guy that was just within 30 minutes of me that had what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually not to go down a rabbit trail, as you like to say, or to make a long story short, I was an acquaintance with his wife. We went to high school together, and so we were able to link up on Facebook and find out what he had and what he was up to, and he was able to get me what I needed.
Yeah. All right. So what were the criteria for this this initial herd? What were you looking for?
I was looking for something that's going to grow out in 6 to 7 months. So I was kind of avoiding those heritage breeds to begin with. And some of that was because of what I mentioned earlier. I wanted to turn these over quickly. I didn't want to get started with something too specialty or too weird. And just because it being my first year, I wanted to sort of just stick to the basics, do some pigs that I knew how they would grow out and the timeframes they would grow out. And I'm not one of those guys that was not looking for pigs that would root until I wanted that, just for the reasons we've already talked about with the brush and multiflora rose and the different brambles and blackberries we have out here. So I'm wanting to utilize that skill or that desire that they have, or as Joel Salatin says, the pigness of the pig.
Yeah.
I was wanting to utilize that on my land. So I wasn't looking for the smaller homestead pigs either. So I was wanting to be in the middle. And what I ended up with were 6 Berkshire, 3 Hampshires, and 2 Blue Buck crosses. And in the end, I'm actually very happy I ended up with a mixture because I kind of get to see how they grow and how they perform differently, and even how they're looking and putting on weight differently. I really wish I could have got a hold of some Durocs. That's just always been one of my favorite pigs that I've ever had access to whenever I was, raising for the fair and different things. But these 11 pigs that I've got have really done the job, and I'm impressed with how they're doing.
Okay, and it's my understanding, talking in pre-screening, that these 11 are destined for freezer camp soon, correct?
That's right. So just within the next 5 days or so, the half of those will be going to the butcher. So I'm selling wholes and halves currently, as you know, Troy, and 8 of the 11 are going to be sold out as wholes and halves. The two of them are going to a close friend who made his own butcher dates, and the last one is going to another close friend who wanted to butcher his own. So so he's going to take that off my farm and butcher at his house, actually. And so 8 of the 11 are going to go to a processor here just within an hour of me. It's not USDA or anything like that. It's just a state inspected processor that will drop the pigs off, and the customer will pick the meat up there.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So that will make you pig negative at that point. You'll be right at 0, I should say, that when that happens. So will the plan be next year to pick up some feeders again and move in that direction? Yeah,
definitely. So I've already, in fact, have people that have reached out to be on my interested list for 2023. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of keep on putting feelers out there for folks that may be hearing about this or seeing me on Facebook or Instagram or other places and want to know what the process is. I just take names, emails, and phone numbers, and I keep a list for 2023, and we'll reach out to those folks when we get closer to time. So there's no commitment to get on the list of interested people, because that just keeps sort of a backlog of customers for me. But then, of course, there'll be commitment once it's time to buy pigs.
Yeah, excellent. So let's go back and talk about the three different breeds that you had. So out of those 3, the Berkshire, the Hampshire, and the Blue Butts, what did have you landed on one? Did you like one over the other? Pros and cons?
Yeah, so it is interesting to see the differences in them. I have not ever personally tasted Berkshire, so I'm very excited to put one of those in my own personal freezer, just so that I can see how that goes and be able to sort of have that conversation ability with customers when I talk about the different breeds. So that's the plan for one of those, will be in my personal freezer. They are interesting because, as I understand, they're somewhat heritage related. and definitely sort of almost borderline lard pig from what I understand, but not like some of your other true lard pig breeds. But you can tell the difference in those versus the Hampshire and the blue butts, because the Hampshire and blue butts are much leaner. They are more of your meat pig, right? Your bacon producers and things like that. But the Berkshire definitely has got that rotund look to them, and they're shaped like an egg almost, compared to the torpedo or long and lean look of the Hampshires and the blue butts.
Yeah. So how's your feed conversion been this year? Would you say one was better than the other? Are you satisfied with what you've had invested this year?
Yeah, I think feed conversion's been really good. Initially, those Berkshires are actually just a bit smaller than when they arrived on farm. They were just a bit smaller than the other breeds. They definitely have caught up and even surpassed, I think, in weight, the Hampshires and the blue butts. In terms of feed conversion, I still need to run the final numbers on that. Tracking of feed has not. I've learned a lot, I guess, in this initial year. I've kept track of what I've bought and what they've eaten, and it'll be interesting to see what hanging weights come back at, from the processor next week, to see what that conversion looks like. I'm really blessed in the feed department to where I get my feed from. The farmer that I buy from is a local guy. He's not a big feed mill or anything like that. He's raised pigs, so he told me up front, this is what you can expect to raise a pig out. This is how much feed it'll take. So, and his advice at the time was 900 pounds per pig, and he seems to be really close to being right from my calculations so far.
Yeah, very good, very good. So that's interesting, and I. This would be something that'd be worth you and I staying in contact. So after your processing, since that's just going to be several weeks away, if you would reach back out to me, because by the time this airs, your processing should be done. And it'd be nice. I can include it in the bumper to give some of those follow-up weights. I'm going to put a note here to maybe do that if you're willing. And we can just kind of see, okay, out of these three different breed types, how they finished out there, and see if there's any data worth looking at. I mean, all the data is obviously worth looking at, but if there's a smoking gun, I guess I should say. So that would
absolutely,
be yeah.
I'd love to help anybody who's listening. I've been helped big time from this podcast, so anything I can provide, Troy, I'd love to do that.
Awesome, sounds great, man. That'd be great. All right, so yeah, I'll reach back out to you, or if you can remember, reach out to me as well, and like I said, we'll include that in this. So people that are listening, they understand that I record my bumpers before we go live, so I can include that prior to or after the interview. Okay, so wow, let's go. So you kind of teased something there that those of y'all listening, I was purposefully not underscoring this, and you may have heard John say that. Those of you who have been really astute in listening picked up that this is his first year in raising pigs on his farm. And you may be listening to John say, wow, I didn't pick up on that from John. John seems like he's got his act together, seems like he knows what he's doing. And I want to carry that over even into, because I feel the same way, I carry that over into John's business presence. So his social media, his website, all that type of stuff. So John just got started with pastured pigs, but you have a good social media presence showing your farm, and you've got your website where people can look and use that to communicate with you, to place orders. Why did you feel it was important to start with that even before you've sold your first pork chop?
I think there's a couple factors. One is my degree is in a business area, so I kind of have some background from my college days and somewhat from my day job related to that as well. But one of the major factors for me, especially in starting the website, was I started following along with a podcast from Charlotte Smith. Not sure if you're familiar with her, Troy, or not.
No.
She's really into farm marketing. That's who she's targeting, is farmers, and how to sell and be a marketing person, a business person, while being a farmer. If you haven't checked her out, definitely do so. She's got a fantastic podcast, and it's not about farming. It's just about selling. And know, these are the sort of her initial podcast. If you scroll all the way back to the beginning of where she started, is like, here's the first 5 or 10 or 20 things you need to do as a starting out farmer. And basically, she's encouraging you to market yourself and not just your product.
Yeah.
And because people are buying from us because they care about our story, they care about who we are and not just what we're selling. And so I sort of just latched onto her advice and went for it, and I sort of started out with the website as a build your own kind of thing. And it's funny enough, because I've reached the end of this first season, I just reached out to a friend who has much better skill in that area than I do to overhaul the website. So possibly even by the time this airs, the website might look even better or be more professional, because I'm just not as creative in that area as other people. But Charlotte Smith was sort of the person that pointed me in the right direction to say, even before you have something to sell, you need to start putting your presence out there, let people know what you're up to, what you're planning, so that they know. And that really did work for me, because approaching my first year, I thought, if I can do 4 or 5 pigs and get those to friends and family, and that would help my land, that would help me get started and figure out the kinks and what I need to tweak and what I need to fix to really start to ramp up and move forward in the future. And just because I had some of those things out there on social media and the website, I was able to more than double that, almost triple what my initial goal was, which was 4 or 5 pigs for the year, just to learn. And I had a friend that's really close to me. He does a lot of meat chickens, and he was pushing me to go for 20. And I think I probably could have even sold 20. And I said, I think I need to stop right here at 10 or 11 just for the year to make sure, I've got this down, and that there's not a major hole in my plan or something I'm missing or a weakness I'm not sure of, because I do like to start small when I start things. I think I mentioned that we started with 6 chickens and we ramped up from there, and it was like that with the pigs too. There's I don't want to say I'm completely risk averse, but I want to take that first year to learn, and then I can be super confident moving forward that now I could do 20 or 50 pigs, because really all you're doing then is adding feed and making their paddock bigger. Yeah. And so I feel a lot better about what I've learned this year.
No, that's great. My goodness, a lot of good stuff there. I love that. Starting small, managing expectations, and not overcommitting, and really being able just to see. It's like a little focus group. You're going to see how this first group does, and then what's the scalability of what I've done here, and how far do I want to take it next year? So backing up to Charlotte, I'm definitely going to check out her podcast, because I think that is spot on. I mean, that's what I hope I've been trying to convey over the last several years here as well, is this idea that you are selling yourself. You're not just selling a product, especially when we're talking about slow food or we're talking about regenerative agriculture. People want to understand the story, and they want to understand that you've taken something that was maybe a rough piece of land, and you're regenerating it as you're producing some great quality food. And people want to know who you are. They want to know, you have kids. Here's all those type of things. People get behind that when they say, not only am I buying a great pork chop or a great egg or a great chicken wing, whatever, I know the farmer. I feel like I know them personally who produced this, because your story's out there. So that's I just I'm going to echo exactly what you said. For people listening, if you haven't transitioned over into turning this into a business, or even if you have, yesterday is the best time to get started on your social media presence and your website presence. And I could go all day on why you need the website more than you even need the social media, but start there, get that going, and it just carries a professional look. And that's what that's what caught my attention about John. I knew this was his first year. Well, actually, no, in pre-screening is when you told me, but I just one of those things that caught my attention. It's like, okay, John's a producer. He knows what he's doing, all that type of stuff. And then it's like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, he this is his first year. This isn't his first rodeo as far as being out on land and doing stuff. But this is his first year taking his product and turning it into a business. And because he had these things in place, It's this professional look. And I know some people may even they knee jerk that a little bit. Say, well, that kind of sounds like you're kind of doing a bait and switch, or you're presenting yourself as somebody you're not. No, you're not saying that you've been doing this for decades. You're not saying you have years and years of experience. You're just showing that, hey, here's ways to communicate with me. Here's details about my product. Here's how we're going to handle the product sales, those type of things. And people really latch on to those visuals. They latch on to people with plans, and they can get behind that. So I applaud what you've done there, John, and I think that's great in starting there first. It's really going to get you ahead of the game as you go to scale up here over the next several years.
Yeah, thank you, Troy. I think if I might just add the bait and switch thing, it can feel like that when you're marketing in general, right? Some of us farmers are just not natural marketers. I know I'm not personally naturally a salesman, so what I wanted to do was build that backstory and just be really honest. I'm starting out, so if you get back far enough on my social media and website, you'll see that I give the story of who we are and that we are just starting out. And I think that's important that you don't do a bait and switch, but you be honest and genuine with who you are and what you're up to. And as you build that backstory, it'll start to market itself for you.
Yes.
And the other thing is that you really don't want to be trying to give attention and building these things when you are trying to farm, because if you're trying to build a website after the fact, it's almost too late. You're going to be busy with the pigs or whatever animal you're focused in on and trying to get them settled. And
yeah, exactly.
I wanted to have all that taken care of up front, knocked out, and not have to worry about that.
Yeah. Everybody does a website build and a social media dump between December and February.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, we're not busy now. Quick, what can we do to actually look professional online? But yeah, no, good words. Good words, definitely.
Yeah, and if you're looking for Charlotte Smith's podcast, it's called The Profitable Mindset. If you or your listeners want to check that out.
Very good. Very good. Yep. Yeah, I'll find that and I'll link that down in the show notes as well. In fact, I'm going to have to put that in my notes. Profitable mindset.
Profitable mindset.
Okay. All right. So along those lines, let's talk about scalability and future plans. So maybe next year or the next 5 years, what does that look like for Poplar Ridge?
I think we're going to sit down this winter and start to do some math. And what I've been sort of mulling over in my head is whether I want to run either 2 sets of smaller batches next year to sort of spread the processing out and spread the customer base out, or if I want to just combine all those into one bigger group. But I think I could easily run one bigger group with the feeder and watering system I have currently and the fencing system I have currently. If I wanted to split those into 2 smaller groups, I'm going to have to, probably add a feeder or a water if those overlap at all. And so those are the things I'm thinking about at the moment, but definitely there's a plan to increase next year. I wouldn't be surprised if we were in the more 20 to 30 pigs next year, just because, like I said, I felt so much better running the 11 that you could, if you can run 11 together, you can run 20 or 30 together. I feel like, at least with the system I have set up, I feel good about that.
Yeah. With the gravity feeder and your watering system, like you said, 11, 20, 25, whatever, all that still computes. Now, so here's the interesting thing, and this is why I want to ask you this, because it's the same situation I run into. So looking at, and I love the idea of splitting a herd or having multiple groups on farm. That way your processing dates are spread out. Because some people, you run into the fact that here you are, October, November, people are gearing up for Christmas, all those additional expenses they're going to have because that's the world we live in. And they may not necessarily have allocated funds to spend almost $1,000 on food. So looking at, hey, do we have processing in the in late summer or early summer, because we've staggered our groups here and can spread that out. And of course, since you're using a state inspected processor, then you could even obviously start selling cuts. If you obviously did some of the things, infrastructure improvements you need to do on the farm there. So looking at that and growing that opportunity and exploring that, would that mean that you're going to entertain looking at keeping pigs over winter, or are you always going to try to be done before the real sloppy season hits?
I think for at least right now, I would probably be done before winter. And that's mainly due to my watering situation. We're currently just watering out of a 55-gallon drum, and I'm not sure I want to be either moving hoses or hauling water through the winter, at least initially. If I get something better set up, which I have, all of us farmers have dreams and goals and plans, for what we'd like to do in the future. And my hope is that the profits from the pigs will be put right back into the farm for really good perimeter fencing and or watering systems, more like the actual buried pipe and connection points under the ground, like you've probably seen with some of the Plassen watering systems that different people like Greg Judy or the Salatins use for connection points under the ground, where you don't have to worry about the frozen water. If I could get that situation going, I would definitely entertain having pigs throughout the winter. What I probably would entertain if I ran two groups, Troy, would be to start earlier, though, because my pigs start out in a sort of sacrificial barnyard area where I refer to it as their training pen, as a lot of people do, where they're learning the electric wire. It wouldn't hurt to have them as small pigs earlier on, I think. And that would probably be my goal, is to maybe, if I did run two groups, start out earlier in the season than I did this year. And then possibly then, halfway through that batch, start a second batch or something like that.
Yeah. So are we looking at maybe having weaners on farm around end of February, 1st of March?
Yeah, I think that would be more along the goal this time, whereas the pigs I have now were born in that April time frame.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so looking at that and saying, wow, that works out well, because especially if they're starting in the sacrificial area or the training area, then that gives you a little bit easier management of frozen issues. And and of course, weaners are going to drink a lot less, so smaller bowls that you can heat or even bury and have some of that thermal mass helping you out there. So yeah, it's a good strategy.
Yeah, the other thing it really would help with would be my processing dates. When I did call this current processor, it was like, hey, if you have any ability to do anything earlier, we have tons of dates before October.
Right.
But she was like, everybody wants hog dates after October.
Yeah.
And that kind of clicked and stuck in my mind as well. As like, if you could just back it up just a little bit, it might be easier to get in with different processors around here.
Yeah. Good deal. All right. So do you see, and then one more question here. So do you see yourself, I think you're going to be a feeder operation for a while. Do you see yourself farrowing at any point?
I don't think I'm going to head down the farrowing path, at least for right now. What I would like to do is let other people specialize in that and take care of that. It's just so easy for me to bring the pigs on farm and get going. Let other people worry about farrowing and weaning and getting them to size. And whereas my main goal with these pigs is property cleanup initially.
Yeah, I
sort of want to put them out there and let them get going with that, right? And I'm also the type of person, though, that does to like to have control over my situation, and it can be difficult to rely on other people to be on their list. But mentioned already that the farmer I buy feed from, and he's actually going to be doing some feeders as well this coming year. He took a trip to Tennessee somewhere and picked up some bloodlines of some sows that he was impressed with, and his plan is to sell some feeder pigs off of that. So I'm thinking whether I split into two groups or do one, I may stick with my breeder I bought from this year, but buy the extra from the farmer I'm buying feed from already, because I have a relationship now with both of them. I feel pretty good about that situation.
Yeah, good deal. Yeah, it's all about establishing those relationships and not just waiting to the last minute to say, oh, it's time to get pigs on the farm. I'm going to start calling around and see what I can find. Man, those are conversations you have now, or like you said, even earlier in the year, and just just make sure they understand that your plan is, hey, if this works out, we can keep this rolling, then you can kind of have a standing order with me each year around this time, unless things change. Then just have those relationships established. That way, you don't run into those surprises. Yeah, but both opportunities are there's pros and cons to both situations. But yeah, I love. Again, it comes back to manage expectations. I love the fact that you're not diving into the deep end of the pool head first and just trying to do everything. You're being methodical in your processes and really looking back and seeing what the results are before you make another big move. It's wise, very wise stuff.
I appreciate that. A lot of that is time management. I'm just, as a lot of farmers are, I still have my day job I need to keep. And so I need to be realistic about what I can do here. And if I can grow, selling the holes and halves initially, and maybe even if I'm going to expand somewhere, it's probably going to be through selling retail cuts or possibly selling wholesale to restaurants. But probably not the farrowing side of things initially.
Yeah, good deal. Good deal. So, John, let me ask you the parting question here. What is your favorite part, or what do you like the most about raising pigs on pasture?
I think for me, and I know a lot of people on this podcast have said this, but it's probably two things. The personality of the pigs. They are such an interesting animal. And I've heard you, Troy, and a lot of your guests even refer to them as that puppy dog or that dog mentality. I go out there and I know they know who I am. When I show up, they're excited to see me. They're running around, and I enjoy just being out there with them. They are a fun animal. They're not something I get overly frustrated with dealing with. There would be nothing worse than having farm animals that you didn't enjoy being around or having on the farm. And so when I do get out there with them each day, it's fun to be out there. And sometimes I just sit out there and watch them do their thing, and they like to follow me around, and they enjoy moving paddock to paddock. But the other big thing for me, and I know I already mentioned this a couple times, is what they're doing to the landscape here. And it really makes it feel like I'm not just wasting this 75 acres. I'm not just sitting on this anymore, but that I'm using the land to help feed my family and to feed other families. There's a total of 16 families that are going to be fed from these 11 pigs this year, plus mine. So it'd be 17 families really. And I'm excited about what they're doing in the landscape in the process, tearing up that multiflora rows and regaining some pasture so that sort of prepping things for possibly other animals, whether that's cattle or sheep or something else in the future, and helping me get control of the land I've got. So those would be the things I enjoy most, and just really enjoyed having them here this first year.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Good answer. All right. Well, so John, if people want to find out more about Poplar Ridge Family Farm, where can they find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, we're all over the place. So on YouTube, it's just referred to as Poplar Ridge. So you could search us on YouTube and find us there. Website is www.ohiopoplarridge.com. And of course, on Facebook and Instagram, we are at Ohio Poplar Ridge. So we're kind of across most of the social media platforms.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I may have to reach out to you at some point. We make it through the Athens area quite a bit, so I may have to reach out to you at some point and maybe meet up for lunch or even come to the farm if you're willing.
That'd be great. We'd love to have you.
All right. All right. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I pray you have a great week.
Thanks, Troy. You too.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, I really appreciate John coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure speaking with him. And as promised at the beginning of the podcast, we have this data I want to share. So if you recall, he had 11 total hogs that he took or that he raised out, two of which, or actually three of which, he didn't have any control of the final processing. Two went to another processor and one was processed on a different farm. So he sent me this lineup, and we'll just stick with hanging weight because I think this is where you're going to have the best comparison. So it looks like John had 5 Berkshire, he had 2 Hampshire, and he had 1 Blue Butt. And no surprise, because this is kind of what I figured it would turn out. Goodness, my nose won't stop itching. Well, they say that's when you're lying, when your nose starts itching. Anyway, it turned out that the blue butt came in at 218 hanging. And in my experience, and I've had blue butts before, that seems like they kind of, they're a longer pig, and they can kind of put on that weight well. So 218, but the rest of his were not that far off. The next heaviest was the let's see, that would be 207, which would be one of the Hampshires, and then 206 was another Hampshire. But he also had a Berkshire that was 207, 206, and then the rest 184, 194, 190. So kind of not a big surprise there. Some of these breeds that are more production style breeds finished a little bit heavier, but it's not this this gaping difference. It's not a smoking gun that we were kind of curious to see if there would be such a thing. So it really doesn't surprise me. And the processing dates, there were 2 different processing dates, so there were 7 days. So 2 of the Berkshire, the Blue Butt, and the Hamp had 7 more days to eat and pack on a little weight there. But within that time frame, it does look like they were pretty close. But I think that's a good indicator. There's a lot of variables there, of course, but it's a good indicator of when you're running a group together. What I'd always been told and what I was taught is that when pigs have the opportunity to kind of jockey each other for position when it comes to feed, then that's a healthy thing. That's a good thing. They can, if there's not unlimited food that they can just go to and eat whenever they want, and there's actually a little bit of competition there, then that encourages them to eat more and to be more aggressive at the trough, not to the point where they're hurting one another, but more aggressive in consuming, maybe a little less waste, because they're going to make sure, hey, I'll lick up everything I can because there's some competition here. And I think that really helps balance stuff out. Now, granted, if you got a runt in there that's getting knocked around, then that's going to show up. But man, I really appreciate John sharing that data with us, and I really like how he's gotten started with his farm. I think he's really taken the right attitude to that. Be sure to check out Charlotte Smith's podcast if you have not. I'm going to put that one on my list as well to be able to listen to that and see what she's got going on. I have a feeling we probably echo each other on a lot, but maybe she obviously, I'm sure, has some other good insights that she can share as well. Well, I appreciate everybody listening and participating with the podcast and the Facebook group. The Pastured Pig Facebook group is growing. There's new people coming in daily, and seems to be some good conversation going there. So be sure to join that if you haven't already. And again, consider the supporting us with Patreon. On the 13th, we'll be having our live chat session. Well, I pray everyone have a great week. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.